wife and my sister, teamed up to teach me a lesson. They learned one instead. I stood in the driveway, staring at my phone, reading the message over and over until the words blurred together. My wife Claire had just texted me that I wasn't welcome at the lake house this weekend because she and my sister Melody decided I needed to learn some humility. The lake house, the one I bought with my inheritance, the one I'd been renovating for the past 8 months with my own 2 hands every weekend, while they planned this so-called family retreat without telling me a single detail. My hands were shaking as I lowered the phone. The late afternoon sun felt too bright against my skin, almost mocking in its warmth. I could hear the neighbor's lawnmower buzzing in the distance, such an ordinary sound for a moment that had just shattered everything I thought I knew about the 2 people I loved most in this world. The smell of fresh-cut grass drifted over, and somehow that made it worse. Everything around me was normal, continuing as if nothing had changed, while my entire reality was crumbling. I read the message again. Melody and I have been talking, and we both agree you've become too controlling and self-centered. We've invited some friends up to the lake house to have a real conversation about your behavior. We decided it's better if you stay home and think about how you treat the people who care about you. Don't bother calling. We need space from your energy right now. My energy. Controlling. Self-centered. The words felt like punches I never saw coming. I'd been married to Claire for 6 years. My sister Melody and I had been close our entire lives, or so I thought. We talked almost every day. She was the first person I called when Dad died and left me that inheritance. She was the one who cried with me at the funeral. She was the one who said I should use some of that money to buy something that would make me happy, something Dad would have wanted. I bought the lake house 3 months after the funeral. It was a fixer-upper about 2 hours north, right on the water with a view that made you forget your troubles the moment you stepped onto the back deck. The place needed work, sure, but I could see its potential. I could see Claire and me hosting Thanksgiving there. I could see Melody bringing her kids up for summer weeks. I could see all of us making memories in a place that felt like Dad was still somehow part of our lives. That was 8 months ago. Every single weekend since then, I'd driven up there alone or with Claire to work on it. I'd replaced the entire roof myself with help from a contractor friend. I'd torn out the old kitchen and installed new cabinets, countertops, appliances. I'd sanded and refinished the hardwood floors on my hands and knees until my back screamed. I'd painted every single wall, replaced the plumbing in both bathrooms, fixed the dock that had been rotting into the lake. Claire had come up maybe a dozen times total. She'd help for an hour or two, then complain about the dust or the heat or the lack of cell service. She'd end up sitting on the deck with a book and a glass of wine while I kept working. I never minded. I figured she was working hard at her job during the week, and everyone needs downtime. She was a marketing director at a mid-sized firm downtown, and she'd been putting in long hours lately trying to land a big client. Melody had visited exactly twice. Both times she'd walked through, made comments about how much work it still needed, and then suggested we go into town for lunch instead of staying there. I remember feeling a little hurt both times, but I brushed it off. She had 3 kids under 10 and a husband who traveled for work. Of course, she didn't have time to help me renovate a house, but now they were both there, right now, at my lake house, with friends I apparently hadn't been deemed worthy of meeting, having conversations about my behavior, my controlling nature, my self-centeredness. I walked into our house, my legs moving on autopilot. The kitchen was exactly as I'd left it that morning. My coffee mug still sat by the sink. Claire's breakfast plate was in the dishwasher, which I'd loaded and started before heading to work. I'd also taken out the trash, wiped down the counters, and left a note reminding her I'd be home late because I had a presentation to finish at the office. The presentation. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was 4:30. I was supposed to be at the office until at least 8 tonight, maybe later. I'd told Claire that this morning. I'd told her I was stressed about it, that this presentation could mean a promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years. She'd kissed my cheek and told me not to worry, that she believed in me. She'd kissed my cheek and told me she believed in me, knowing full well she'd be driving up to our lake house that afternoon to talk about what a terrible person I'd become. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten dinner together just last night. I'd made pasta because it was her favorite. We'd talked about maybe taking a vacation in the fall, somewhere warm. She'd seemed excited. She'd seemed like my wife, my partner, the person who was supposed to be on my side no matter what. My phone buzzed with a text from Melody. "Don't be dramatic about this. It's an intervention because we love you. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can see our blind spots. Take the weekend to really reflect. We'll talk Monday." An intervention. They were calling this an intervention. I thought interventions were for people with serious problems, people who were hurting themselves or others in obvious ways. What had I done that warranted an intervention? I worked hard. I provided for my family. I'd used my inheritance to buy something that could benefit all of us, not just myself. I'd spent months of weekends working on that house instead of relaxing because I wanted to create something special. I opened my laptop and pulled up our joint bank account. Claire and I had always kept our finances combined. We'd never had secrets about money. I scrolled through the recent transactions, looking for the charge for the drive up to the lake house, maybe gas or food for the trip. That's when I saw them. Charges I didn't recognize. A payment to a catering company called Lakeside Events for $2,000. A charge to a party supply rental place for $1,500. Another charge to a liquor store in the town near the lake house for $800. All of them from our joint account. All of them from the past week. All of them authorized by Claire. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a weekend getaway to talk about my behavior. This was a party. They were throwing a party at my lake house, using my money, and they'd specifically excluded me from it. I kept scrolling. There was more. A charge to a spa in that same town for $600, dated for tomorrow. Appointments for Claire and Melody, according to the transaction description. There were charges to restaurants, to a wine bar, to a boutique clothing store, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, all spent in the last few days, all in preparation for this weekend that I wasn't invited to. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were pressing in. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our backyard where I'd built Claire a garden bed last spring. I'd spent 3 weekends constructing it, filling it with good soil, planting the herbs and vegetables she said she wanted to grow. She'd used it exactly twice before losing interest, and now it was overgrown with weeds. I'd built her that garden because she'd mentioned once, casually, that she wished she could grow her own tomatoes. One offhand comment. And I'd turned it into a project because I thought that's what you did when you loved someone. You paid attention. You remembered the little things they wanted. You tried to make their lives better. But somehow, according to the message on my phone, I was the controlling one. I was the self-centered one. My mind raced back through the past few months, searching for clues I'd missed. Claire had been distant lately, but I'd attributed it to work stress. She'd been spending more time on her phone, but I figured she was texting friends or scrolling social media like everyone did. She'd been less interested in physical intimacy, but we'd been together 6 years, and I knew that sometimes desire ebbed and flowed. I'd tried not to take it personally. Melody had been different too, now that I thought about it. Our daily phone calls had become less frequent. When we did talk, she seemed distracted, giving short answers to my questions about her kids and her life. A few times I'd tried to tell her about problems I was having at work, and she'd cut me off with advice I didn't ask for, or changed the subject entirely. I'd felt hurt but told myself she was busy, overwhelmed with her own responsibilities. Now I wondered if they'd been pulling away deliberately. If they'd been building this narrative about who I was, what I'd become, and I'd been too trusting to see it happening. I picked up my phone and called Claire. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Melody. Same thing. They'd turned off their phones or blocked my number. The intervention apparently included cutting off all communication. I sat back down at the table and forced myself to breathe slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Part of me wanted to get in my car and drive up there right now to demand answers, to defend myself against accusations I didn't fully understand. But another part of me, the part that was already starting to shift from shock to something colder and more calculating, told me to wait, to think, to understand what I was really dealing with before I made any moves. I opened my laptop again and checked my email. There was a message from Claire sent 3 hours ago, right around the time she would have been getting into her car to drive north. The subject line read, "Some things you should know." My hand hesitated over the trackpad. Did I want to read this? Did I want to see what she'd written? What justifications or accusations she'd typed out while I'd been sitting in my office preparing for a presentation she knew was important to me? I clicked it open. I know you'll see the charges and wonder what's going on, so I wanted to explain before you overreact like you always do. Melody and I have been worried about you for a while now. You've become obsessed with that house, pouring all your time and energy into it while neglecting your actual relationships. You barely talk to me anymore except to give me updates about plumbing and paint colors. You snap at me when I don't want to spend my weekends doing manual labor. You've stopped asking about my work, my feelings, my life. Everything has to revolve around your projects, your schedule, your priorities. Melody feels the same way. She says you've become dismissive of her problems, that you talk over her, that you've started acting like you're better than everyone else since you got that inheritance. We love you, but we can't keep enabling this behavior. We've invited some mutual friends up to the lake house this weekend, people who've also noticed the changes in you, so we can have an honest conversation about it. We're using the joint account because this is a joint issue. Your behavior affects both of us, and we deserve to use shared resources to address it. Don't try to come up here. Don't call me 20 times. Just stay home and think about whether you really want to be the kind of person who can't accept feedback from the people who care about him. I'll be back Sunday night and we can talk then, if you're ready to actually listen. Claire. I read it twice, then a third time. Each time, the words felt more like a stranger had written them. This didn't sound like my wife. Claire was gentle, soft-spoken, someone who avoided confrontation. She'd never sent me an email like this before, so formal and cold and accusatory. This sounded like something someone had helped her write, coached her through. Melody. This had Melody's fingerprints all over it. My sister had always been the more assertive one, the one who spoke her mind without filter. Growing up, she'd been the one who got me in trouble by convincing me her ideas were good ones, then letting me take the fall when they backfired. I'd forgotten about that pattern until right now, sitting in my kitchen reading an email that felt like a script someone else had written for my wife. I thought about Claire's words, that I'd stopped asking about her work. I'd literally asked her yesterday how the big client pitch went. She'd said fine and changed the subject. I'd asked her last week if she wanted to go to that new restaurant she'd mentioned. She'd said she was too tired. I'd suggested we take a weekend trip somewhere instead of going to the lake house, just the two of us. And she'd said she couldn't take time off work right now. Every attempt I'd made to connect with her lately, she'd shut down. And now she was claiming I was the one who'd stopped engaging? And Melody? Dismissive of her problems? I'd listened to her complain about her husband for hours on the phone last month. I'd offered her money when she mentioned they were struggling with daycare costs. She'd turned it down and seemed offended I'd offered, so I'd dropped it. Was that being dismissive? Or was I supposed to insist? To force my help on her even when she said no? The more I thought about it, the more nothing made sense. These accusations felt like they'd been pulled from thin air, or worse, twisted from innocent interactions until they fit a narrative someone wanted to tell. I stood up and walked to our bedroom. Claire's closet door was open, and I could see gaps where clothes had been. She'd packed for more than just a weekend. I counted at least 5 or 6 outfits missing, plus shoes, accessories. This wasn't a simple trip. This was planned, deliberate, extensive. On her nightstand sat a book I'd bought her last month for her birthday. She'd said she was excited to read it. The bookmark was still on page 12. Next to it was a framed photo of us from our wedding day, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. I picked it up and studied our faces. Had I changed that much? Had I really become someone unrecognizable? Or had she changed and needed a reason to justify it? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Melody. Also, just so you know, we invited Brandon and Ashley, Tom and Jennifer, and a few others. If you're wondering why they're all on your wife's side, maybe that should tell you something. Nobody wanted to tell you the truth because you react so badly to criticism. This is us trying to help you before you push everyone away permanently. Brandon and Ashley, Tom and Jennifer. These were couple friends we'd made over the years, people we'd had over for dinner, gone out with for drinks. I'd considered them my friends too, not just Claire's. And apparently they'd all agreed I was the problem. Agreed enough to drive 2 hours north to participate in this intervention I knew nothing about. I tried to remember the last time we'd all hung out together. It had been maybe 6 weeks ago, a barbecue at Tom and Jennifer's place. I'd spent most of the evening talking to Tom about his job transition. He'd seemed stressed about it, and I'd tried to offer advice based on my own career experience. Jennifer had made a comment at one point about me always having an answer for everything, and everyone had laughed. I'd laughed too, thinking it was just friendly teasing. Had that been a sign? Had they all been sitting around discussing my flaws, building a case against me while I'd thought we were friends? The thought made me feel sick. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The man in the mirror looked tired, confused, betrayed. I barely recognized him. This morning I'd been a husband preparing for an important work presentation. Tonight, I was someone whose wife had taken over his property, spent thousands of his dollars, and rallied their friends to confront him about problems he didn't know existed. I dried my face and went back to the kitchen. My laptop was still open to the bank account. I started going through transactions more carefully, expanding the time frame. The catering, the party supplies, those were recent. But there were other charges I'd overlooked before. Dinner at an expensive restaurant 3 weeks ago when Claire told me she was working late. Another dinner 2 weeks before that, same story. A hotel charge in the city from a month ago, one night, when she'd said she was visiting a college friend who'd come into town. My stomach dropped. I clicked on the hotel charge for more details. It was a boutique hotel downtown, the kind with a bar on the roof where young professionals went to see and be seen. Not the kind of place you stayed if you were visiting with an old friend. That's the kind of place you stayed if you wanted to feel single for a night. I sat very still, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. Was Claire cheating on me? Was that what this was really about? Was this whole intervention set up a way to make me the villain so she could justify whatever she'd been doing behind my back? I grabbed my phone and pulled up her location. We'd always shared locations with each other, a safety thing that had never felt invasive before. She was exactly where she'd said she'd be, at the lake house. I zoomed in on the map. There were other people there too, 4 other location markers I recognized from our shared contacts. Brandon, Ashley, Tom, Jennifer, all there, exactly as Melody had said. But who else? Who else was at my house right now, drinking my liquor, eating my catered food, preparing to sit in judgment of me? I did something I'd never done before. I opened Instagram on my laptop and searched for Claire's profile. Her account was public, something I'd always thought was fine because she mostly posted pictures of food and sunsets, nothing too personal. Her most recent story, posted 2 hours ago, showed a photo of the lake house deck with the caption, "Much-needed girls' weekend with my favorites." Girls' weekend. Not an intervention. Not a serious conversation about someone's behavior. A girls' weekend. With champagne glasses in the foreground and fairy lights I'd strung up last month twinkling in the background. I clicked through to see who'd viewed her story. Dozens of people, including some I didn't recognize. I clicked on Melody's profile next. She'd posted a similar photo with the caption, "Finally taking time for self-care with my sister-in-law and best friends. We all need people who get it. Sister-in-law, best friends." The words made me want to throw my phone across the room. I was her brother, her actual blood relative, and she was posting about Claire like they were the ones with the real relationship, like I was just an obstacle they'd had to work around. I kept scrolling. There were photos from earlier in the day. Claire and Melody getting pedicures together. Claire and Melody shopping in the boutique downtown. The timestamps told the story. They'd spent the entire day together, doing all those things the bank charges had shown me, having fun while I'd been at work trying to prepare for a presentation that could change my career. In one photo, I could see someone else's hand holding a champagne glass. Someone with red nail polish and a gold bracelet I didn't recognize. In another, there was a man's laugh in the background, caught mid-sound by whoever was recording. Men were there. This wasn't a girls' weekend. This was a party. A party at my house that I'd been explicitly uninvited to while being told it was for my own good. The anger started then, hot and sharp in my chest. I'd been trying to stay calm, to understand, to figure out if maybe they had a point about something. But this wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about honest conversation or intervention or tough love. This was about exclusion. This was about humiliation. This was about taking something I'd worked for and using it against me while pretending they were doing me a favor. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkening kitchen as the sun set outside. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness, letting my mind work through what I knew and what I needed to do next. Claire and Melody had made a miscalculation. They'd assumed I'd react emotionally, that I'd blow up their phones with angry messages, maybe even drive up there and make a scene they could point to later as evidence of my controlling nature. They'd probably hoped for that, actually. It would make their story more believable, give them ammunition for whatever narrative they were building. But I wasn't going to do that. I was going to think. I was going to plan. I was going to figure out exactly what was happening and why. And then I was going to respond in a way they never saw coming. I pulled up the bank account again and started documenting everything. I took screenshots of every charge related to this weekend. I downloaded bank statements going back 6 months. I made a folder on my computer labeled Documentation and began organizing everything by date and category. Then I opened my phone and started a new note. I titled it Timeline and began writing down everything I could remember from the past few months. Every time Claire had claimed to be working late, every time Melody had been distant or dismissive, every conversation that had felt slightly off, every moment where I'd felt confused or hurt but had pushed the feeling aside. The list grew longer than I expected. Once I started paying attention to the pattern, it was everywhere. Claire coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. Melody asking detailed questions about my finances. Claire suddenly being interested in what time I'd be home from work each day. Melody suggesting I should think about whether the lake house was really worth all the effort I was putting into it. They'd been planning this. Not for days or weeks, but for months. This whole thing had been in motion for a long time, and I'd been too trusting, too focused on work and the renovation, too convinced that my wife and sister loved me to see it coming. I thought about my dad then. He'd been a careful man, someone who always said trust, but verify. He'd been in business for himself, owned a small construction company, and he'd learned the hard way that people weren't always who they seemed to be. He'd had partners steal from him. He'd had employees lie to his face. He'd had friends turn on him when money got tight. He'd taught me to be different, to be trusting, to assume the best in people. He'd said his cynicism had cost him relationships that might have been genuine, and he didn't want that for me. So I'd taken his advice. I'd opened my heart to people. I'd believed what they told me. And now look where that had gotten me. I picked up my phone and called my dad's lawyer, a man named Richard Moss who'd handled the estate after Dad died. It was late on a Friday evening, but Richard had always told me to call if I ever needed anything. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "This is Richard," he said, his voice warm and professional even at this hour. "Richard, it's me, Nathan. I'm sorry to call so late." "Nathan, no need to apologize. Is everything all right?" I paused, trying to figure out how to explain this situation. "I need some legal advice about my marriage and about property rights." There was a brief silence on the other end. "I see. Do you want to come by the office Monday morning? We can sit down and talk through whatever's going on." "I'd rather talk now, if you have time. Things are happening this weekend, and I need to understand my options before Monday." Another pause. "All right, give me the overview and we'll go from there." I told him everything. The message from Claire, the bank charges, the lake house party I wasn't invited to, the accusations in her email, the hotel charge I'd found, the pattern of behavior going back months. I kept my voice steady, factual, unemotional. I laid it all out like a case file. When I finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. "Nathan, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you done anything that could be construed as controlling or abusive behavior toward your wife?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I work hard. I've been renovating the lake house on weekends. I've been focused on a potential promotion at work. But I've never raised my voice to Claire, never restricted her access to money or friends, never monitored her communications or movements beyond the normal location sharing we both agreed to. If anything, I've been too hands-off lately, giving her space because she seemed stressed. And the lake house, that's in your name only, correct? Purchased with your inheritance before the marriage?" "After the marriage, but yes. Purchased entirely with inheritance money. My name only on the deed." And your wife has been spending marital funds on what sounds like a significant party at this property without your knowledge or consent? Thousands of dollars over the past week, plus the hotel charge from last month that she lied about. Richard exhaled slowly. Nathan, I'm not a divorce attorney, but I know several excellent ones. What I'm hearing suggests your wife may be laying groundwork for either a divorce or some kind of financial leverage over you. The intervention narrative is clever, because it positions her as the concerned spouse trying to help, while actually she's building a case that you're difficult or unreasonable. That can be useful in settlement negotiations. The word divorce hit me like cold water. I'd been thinking about betrayal, about hurt feelings and damaged relationships. But Richard was thinking about legal strategy, about asset protection, about the mechanics of a marriage ending. You think she wants a divorce? I asked. I think she's keeping her options open and making sure she has the upper hand if it comes to that. The fact that she's doing this with your sister's involvement is particularly calculated. It isolates you socially and gives her credibility with mutual friends and family. She's not just protecting herself financially, she's protecting her reputation. I stood up and paced across the kitchen. So what do I do? First thing Monday morning, you're going to meet with a divorce attorney. I'll text you the names of 3 I trust. You're going to show them everything you've documented tonight. Second, you're going to open a separate bank account and move half the joint funds into it. You're entitled to that, and you need to protect yourself from further unauthorized spending. Third, you're going to change any passwords she has access to, including email, social media, and financial accounts. Fourth, and this is important, you're going to continue documenting everything, but you're not going to confront her or your sister until you've talked to the attorney. You want me to just let them have their party? Let them keep talking about me behind my back? I want you to be smart. They want you to react emotionally. They're probably expecting it. Every time you call or text or show up there, you give them evidence to support their narrative. But if you stay calm, document everything, and take strategic action through proper legal channels, you maintain the high ground. This isn't about revenge, Nathan. This is about protecting yourself and your assets from people who've shown they're willing to manipulate and deceive you. His words made sense, but they also made everything more real. This wasn't just a bad weekend or a misunderstanding. This was my marriage potentially ending. This was my relationship with my sister possibly damaged beyond repair. This was my life splitting into before and after this moment. Richard, can I ask you something else? Of course. Is it possible I actually am the problem here? That they're right, and I've been blind to my own behavior? He was quiet for a moment. I didn't know your father well, Nathan, but I knew him well enough to know he raised you with good values. In the 6 months I worked with you settling his estate, you were patient, fair, and considerate to everyone involved, including family members who were making things difficult. Those aren't the behaviors of someone who's controlling or self-centered. Could you have blind spots? Sure, we all do. But the way your wife is handling this situation, the deception and financial manipulation, those aren't the actions of someone who's genuinely concerned about their partner's well-being. Those are the actions of someone who's protecting their own interests at your expense. After I hung up with Richard, I sat in the darkness for a long time. My phone was silent now. No more texts from Claire or Melody. They were done explaining themselves, done justifying their actions. Now they were just up there at my house, enjoying themselves, probably toasting to their successful manipulation of the foolish man who'd trusted them. I thought about driving up there anyway. I imagined walking in, seeing all their faces turn toward me in shock and maybe fear. I imagined demanding answers, forcing them to explain themselves in front of all those friends who'd apparently taken their side without ever hearing mine. But then I imagined Claire's voice, dripping with false concern, saying something like, "See, everyone? This is exactly what we were talking about. He can't respect boundaries. He can't handle feedback. This is why we're worried about him." And everyone nodding along, feeling vindicated, feeling like they'd been right to judge me. No, Richard was right. I needed to be smarter than that. I went to the bedroom and pulled out a duffel bag. I packed clothes for the weekend, toiletries, my laptop and chargers. I wasn't going to sit in this house for the next 2 days drowning in hurt and anger. I was going to go somewhere neutral, somewhere I could think clearly and start making plans. I called a hotel near my office and booked a room for 2 nights. Then I went through the house methodically, gathering documents I might need. Marriage certificate, tax returns, bank statements, insurance policies, the deed to the lake house, my passport. I put everything in a folder and added it to my bag. Before I left, I went back to the kitchen and opened my laptop one more time. I logged into our joint account and transferred exactly half the balance into my personal checking account. According to the records, there was $47,000 in there. I moved $23,500, not a penny more than my share. Then I went through and changed every password I had. Email, banking, social media, cloud storage, streaming services, everything. I enabled two-factor authentication on anything that supported it. I logged out of all devices except my own phone and laptop. Finally, I opened my email and composed a message to Claire. I kept it short and factual. I've seen the charges. I've read your email. I've documented everything. I'm not going to call or text or show up there because I have more respect for myself than that. I've moved my share of the joint account to protect myself from further unauthorized spending. I've secured my personal accounts. When you get home Sunday, we'll talk, but it will be on my terms this time, not yours. Enjoy your party. I hope it was worth it. I hit send and closed the laptop. Then I grabbed my bag, locked up the house, and drove to the hotel. The room was generic and impersonal, which was exactly what I needed. I ordered food, ate mechanically while watching mindless television, and then lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed around midnight. A text from Claire. "How dare you take money from our account? That's controlling behavior exactly like we've been talking about. You're proving our point." I didn't respond. A few minutes later, another text. "Taking money and changing passwords is financial abuse. I hope you realize you're making this so much worse for yourself." Still, I didn't respond. She sent 3 more messages over the next hour, each one angrier than the last. She demanded I transfer the money back. She said I was being childish and vindictive. She said I was showing my true colors and she was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. Tomorrow was Saturday. I'd spend the day researching divorce attorneys, organizing my documentation, and preparing for the week ahead. I'd go to the gym. I'd eat good meals. I'd take care of myself. I'd do everything I could to stay clear-headed and focused. Because one thing had become absolutely clear to me in the past few hours. This wasn't just about a bad weekend or hurt feelings. This was about my wife and my sister systematically undermining me, spending my money, using my property, and recruiting my friends to support their version of reality. This was calculated. This was deliberate. This was cruel. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Sunday morning, my phone was full of messages I'd missed because I'd turned it off. More from Claire, angrier and more desperate. Several from Melody, accusing me of being dramatic and ruining everyone's weekend by causing stress. A few from some of the friends who were apparently at the lake house, people I'd considered close friends, telling me I needed to apologize to Claire and be more open to feedback. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one person wondered if maybe there was another side to this story. They'd all made up their minds about who I was and what I'd done, based entirely on what Claire and Melody had told them. I responded to exactly one message, the one from Brandon. We'd been friends since college before either of us was married. I'd been in his wedding. He'd been in mine. If anyone should have given me the benefit of the doubt, it was him. I typed, "Did you ask Claire to show you the bank statements? Did you ask her about the hotel charge from last month when she told me she was with a college friend? Did you ask her why she planned this entire party without telling me, using money from our joint account at a house I bought and renovated? Or did you just believe everything she said because it was easier than thinking critically?" He didn't respond. None of them did after that. Maybe because they realized they hadn't asked any questions. They'd just accepted the narrative they'd been fed. Or maybe because they didn't want to admit they might have been wrong about me. I spent Sunday morning in the hotel gym, running on the treadmill until my legs burned and my thoughts quieted. Then I showered, dressed, and drove to a coffee shop where I spent hours on my laptop reading articles about divorce law, financial rights in marriage, and how to protect yourself during separation. I learned that taking half the joint account wasn't financial abuse, it was protecting my assets. I learned that changing passwords on my own personal accounts was my right. I learned that in my state, property purchased with inheritance money was considered separate property unless it had been explicitly added to the marriage through some legal action, which I hadn't done. The lake house was mine, completely, legally mine. Claire had no claim to it whatsoever, and she'd just spent thousands of dollars of marital funds on a party at a property she had no legal ownership of without my consent. The more I read, the better I felt. Not happy, not vindicated exactly, but clearer. I understood the game now. I understood what they'd been trying to do and why it hadn't worked the way they'd planned. Around 4 in the afternoon, I drove back to our house. Claire's car wasn't there yet. She'd said she'd be home Sunday evening, but apparently the party was still going strong enough to keep her there late. I went inside and looked around with new eyes. This was my house too, not just hers. I'd paid half the mortgage, done half the work maintaining it, made half the decisions about how we'd lived in it. But somehow, over the past months, I'd started to feel like a guest in my own home, like I was intruding on Claire's space whenever I was there. That ended now. I went to our bedroom and started sorting through Claire's belongings, not throwing anything away, but creating clear physical separation. Her clothes went to one side of the closet. Her products in the bathroom got moved to a specific cabinet. I took my wedding ring off and put it in my nightstand drawer, not as a gesture of anger, but as an acknowledgement of reality. Whatever this marriage had been, it wasn't that anymore. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. Claire got home just after 7, walking in with a bag slung over her shoulder and sunglasses perched on her head despite the evening darkness. She looked relaxed, happy even, until she saw me sitting there. "You're here," she said, her voice careful. "I live here," I replied evenly. She set her bag down and crossed her arms. "We need to talk about the money you took and the passwords you changed. That was completely inappropriate. It was half the joint account. My half. You'd already spent thousands of dollars without discussing it with me. I was protecting what was mine. That money was for all of us, for an event designed to help you. It was for a party you threw at my house without inviting me. Let's call it what it actually was." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "You're twisting this. We were trying to create a safe space where people could be honest with you about how you've changed. By spending my money and using my property while specifically excluding me? That's not an intervention, Claire. That's a hostile takeover." Her face flushed. "I knew you'd react this way. This is exactly why we needed to do it without you there. You can't handle any criticism. You immediately get defensive and make yourself the victim. Show me the hotel receipt from last month, the one from when you said you were visiting a college friend." She went very still. "What?" "The boutique hotel downtown. One night, $400 from our joint account. Who were you with, Claire?" "That's none of your business. That was a private thing with a friend. A friend whose name you won't say. At a hotel in our own city. On a night you claimed to be doing something else." I stood up, keeping my voice level. "I've been naive. I've trusted you when I should have been paying attention, but I'm paying attention now. You've been going through my things? Checking up on me? That's exactly the controlling behavior we've been trying to address. I looked at our joint bank account, which I have every right to access. You're the one who's been lying about where you've been and what you've been doing with our shared money." We stared at each other across the kitchen. In 6 years of marriage, we'd never stood like this, on opposite sides of everything. The distance between us felt infinite. "I want you to leave," she said finally. "Go stay somewhere else for a while. Give us both space to think." "No." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, this is my house too. I'm not going anywhere. If you need space, you're welcome to stay somewhere else. Maybe with Melody, since you two seem to be such close allies now. You can't kick me out of my own home." "I'm not kicking you out. I'm refusing to be kicked out. There's a difference." She grabbed her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Go ahead, call them. While you're at it, ask them about the legal implications of spending thousands of dollars of marital funds without spousal consent. Ask them about lying regarding your whereabouts and activities. Ask them how a judge might view that in divorce proceedings." The word divorce hung in the air between us like something toxic. Claire's hand trembled slightly as she lowered the phone. "You want a divorce?" she whispered. "I want honesty. I want respect. I want the woman I married, who would never have treated me the way you've been treating me. But I don't think that woman exists anymore. if she ever really did. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but they felt performative somehow, like she'd calculated that crying might soften me. I just wanted you to see how you've been acting. Melody and I thought if your friends told you the same things we'd been trying to say, you'd finally listen. What things, Claire? Be specific. Tell me exactly what I've done that warranted all of this. She wiped at her eyes. You've been distant, obsessed with that house. You don't care about my needs anymore. I asked you yesterday how your client pitch went. You said fine and walked away. I suggested a vacation together 3 weeks ago. You said you were too busy. I've been trying to connect with you for months and you've shut me down every time. So what needs am I not caring about? The need to be excluded from events at a property I own? The need to have secret hotel stays you lie about? What exactly should I be doing differently? She had no answer. She just stood there, tears running down her face, looking lost. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the messages, the party, the bank charges, the careful manipulation of the past months, and the sympathy evaporated. I think we should sleep in separate rooms tonight, I said. Tomorrow I'm meeting with a lawyer. I suggest you do the same. We'll figure out next steps from there. Nathan, please, can't we just talk about this like adults? We could have talked about this at any point in the past few months. You chose not to. You chose to go behind my back, turn my sister against me, rally our friends, throw a party at my expense, and then act like I'm the unreasonable one for not accepting it gracefully. You made your choices, Claire. Now I'm making mine. I walked past her toward the guest bedroom, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Behind me, I heard her sob, loud and dramatic. A year ago, that sound would have broken me. I would have turned around, apologized even though I'd done nothing wrong, tried to comfort her and fix whatever was broken between us. But that was before I understood what I was dealing with. That was before I realized that some people cried not because they were hurt, but because they were losing control of a situation they'd carefully constructed. I closed the guest room door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, finally letting myself feel the weight of everything that had happened. My marriage was over. My relationship with my sister was damaged, maybe permanently. My friend group would likely take sides, and given how this weekend had gone, most of them probably wouldn't choose mine. But I was still here. I was still thinking clearly. I'd protected my assets, documented everything, and maintained my dignity when they'd tried to strip it away. That had to count for something. My phone buzzed. A text from Melody. Claire just called me crying. She says you're being horrible to her. This is exactly what we were afraid of. You're showing your true face now. I typed back, ask her about the hotel charge. Ask her who she was really with. Then ask yourself if you want to keep backing someone who's been lying to both of us. She responded immediately. You're paranoid and controlling. She already explained that to me. What did she explain? Specifically, what did she tell you about that night? No response. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, another text. That's between her and me. But I know my sister-in-law, and I know my brother. Right now, I'm choosing to believe her. You mean you're choosing to believe the story that lets you feel justified about what you did this weekend? That's different from actually knowing the truth. Whatever, Nathan. When you're ready to apologize and actually work on yourself, let me know. Until then, I think we need space. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to her. She'd picked her side, chosen her ally, decided who she wanted to be in this situation. I couldn't change that. I lay back on the guest bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Claire moving around in the rest of the house. At some point, she left, probably going to Melody's or maybe back to that boutique hotel with whoever she'd been seeing. I didn't check. I didn't care. I just lay there in the darkness, thinking about my dad, about how he'd worked so hard to build something meaningful with his life, how he'd loved my mom until the day she died, faithful and devoted through 30 years of marriage, how he'd tried to teach me to be a good man, someone who kept his word and treated people fairly. I'd tried to be that person. I'd worked hard, provided for my wife, tried to build something beautiful with the inheritance he'd left me. I'd loved my sister, stayed close to her even as our lives diverged. I'd trusted the people around me because Dad had said that trust was the foundation of every meaningful relationship. But he'd also said something else, something I'd forgotten until now. Right before he died, When he was in the hospital and knew he didn't have much time left, he'd squeezed my hand and said, "Nathan, remember, just because you love someone doesn't mean they love you back the same way. And just because you trust someone doesn't mean they've earned it. Watch people's actions, not their words. Actions tell you who they really are." I'd nodded, thinking he was being overly cynical because of the pain medication or the stress of dying. I'd thought his bad experiences had made him suspicious of everyone, and I'd vowed not to become that way myself. But now I understood. He hadn't been cynical. He'd been wise. He'd learned through hard experience what I was learning now. Some people will take everything you offer and still demand more. Some people will twist your kindness into obligation and your generosity into debt. Some people will smile to your face while planning your downfall behind your back. Claire and Melody had shown me who they really were, not through their words about intervention and concern and love, but through their actions, the secret planning, the financial manipulation, the public humiliation disguised as help, the recruitment of friends to their cause without giving me any chance to defend myself. That was who they were, and now I knew. Now I could respond accordingly, not with emotion or desperation or the dramatic scene they'd probably hoped for, but with cold, calculated strategy. They'd tried to teach me a lesson this weekend. They'd tried to humble me, control me, reshape me into whatever version of myself would be easier for them to manage. Instead, they'd taught me something else entirely. They'd taught me that I was stronger than I'd known, that I could take a devastating blow and stay standing, that I could see through manipulation when I chose to look clearly, that I could protect myself when I needed to. Tomorrow I'd meet with lawyers. This week I'd begin the process of disentangling my life from Claire's. I'd figure out what came next, one strategic step at a time. I'd document everything, protect my assets, and make sure that whatever happened, I came out of this with my integrity intact. Because that was the real lesson of this weekend, not the one they'd tried to teach me about being controlling or self-centered or whatever narrative they'd constructed. The real lesson was this: when people show you who they truly are, believe them the first time. Cut your losses and move forward without looking back. And that's exactly what I was going to do. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after you've stopped pretending everything might work itself out. I woke up at 6, showered, put on my best suit, and drove to the office of the first attorney Richard had recommended. Her name was Victoria Chen, and her reviews online described her as methodical, aggressive when needed, and someone who didn't tolerate nonsense from opposing counsel. The office was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of quiet efficiency that costs serious money. The receptionist offered me coffee while I waited, and I accepted, grateful for something to do with my hand. My phone had been buzzing all morning with messages from Claire, alternating between apologetic and accusatory, but I'd ignored every single one. Victoria had told me during our brief phone conversation yesterday not to communicate with my spouse except through attorneys once I retained one. Victoria herself appeared exactly 15 minutes after my appointment time, a tall woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a handshake that conveyed both professionalism and a warning. We sat in her office overlooking the city, and she pulled out a legal pad and pen, old school, despite the laptop sitting closed on her desk. "Tell me everything," she said. "Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out, even if you think it makes you look bad." I spent the next hour walking through my entire marriage, meeting Claire at a work conference 6 years ago, the whirlwind courtship, the wedding that Melody had helped plan, the early years that had felt genuinely happy, or at least I'd thought they were, Dad's death 2 years ago, the inheritance, the decision to buy the lake house, the slow deterioration I hadn't recognized until it exploded this past weekend. Victoria took notes steadily, occasionally interrupting to ask specific questions. How much was the inheritance? Was any of it commingled with marital funds? Did Claire contribute to the lake house renovation financially or through labor? Had there been any previous separations or marriage counseling? Did I have evidence of her lies about her whereabouts? I showed her everything I'd documented. The bank statements with highlighted charges, screenshots of Claire's location history showing she'd been at the boutique hotel when she'd claimed to be with a friend, The emails and text messages from this weekend, the Instagram posts from the lake house party, the deed showing the property was in my name alone. When I finished, Victoria set down her pen and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Harrison, I'm going to be direct with you because that's how I work, and because you're paying me for honest advice, not comfort. Your wife appears to be building a case for either a very advantageous divorce settlement or leverage to control the marriage going forward. The intervention narrative is actually quite clever because it positions any reasonable boundary you set as further evidence of the controlling behavior she's accusing you of. So I was right. This was planned. Almost certainly. The involvement of your sister adds a familial credibility that would be useful in court or in social circles. The recruitment of mutual friends creates witnesses who can testify to her version of events. The spending of significant marital funds on an event you weren't invited to could be positioned as her desperately trying to help you, spending money on therapy or intervention rather than personal enjoyment. I felt my jaw tighten. Except it wasn't therapy. It was a party, which you have evidence of, and that's good. But here's what concerns me. You mentioned possible infidelity. The hotel charge, the cologne, the evasiveness. If she's having an affair, that changes the calculation significantly, especially in this state. We have fault-based divorce grounds, and adultery is one of them. It can affect property division and potentially spousal support. I don't have proof of an affair, just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. Victoria nodded slowly. Then we need to either get proof or proceed without it. Here's what I recommend. First, we file for legal separation immediately. This protects you financially, establishes a formal record of when the marriage began breaking down, and prevents her from running up debts or making major financial decisions that affect you. Second, we hire a forensic accountant to go through your finances with a fine-tooth comb. If she's been siphoning money or hiding assets, we'll find it. Third, and this is optional, we hire a private investigator to document her activities. The idea of hiring someone to follow my wife made my stomach turn. Is that really necessary? Necessary? Maybe not. Strategic? Absolutely. If she is having an affair, that information is valuable. If she's not, we've ruled it out and can focus on other aspects of the case. But more importantly, it sends a message. It tells her and her attorney that you're serious, that you're not going to be manipulated or intimidated, and that you have resources to uncover the truth. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me hated the idea of stooping to that level, of becoming the kind of person who spied on their spouse. But another part of me, the part that had learned this weekend that trust without verification was just naivety, knew Victoria was right. Do it, I said. All of it. File for separation, hire the accountant, hire the investigator. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Victoria smiled for the first time since I'd entered her office. Good. Now let's talk about the lake house. That's your separate property, purchased entirely with inheritance funds. Your wife has no legal claim to it. However, she may argue that she contributed to its value through labor or that you gave her an implied interest in it through your actions. Did she help with the renovation at all? Maybe a dozen weekends over 8 months, a few hours of painting, some decorating input, nothing substantial. And did you ever tell her the house was partly hers? Put her name on any documents related to it? Promise her ownership or decision-making authority? No. I always referred to it as our lake house in conversation, meaning we'd both use it. But legally, I never gave her any ownership interest. That's good. Very good. It means the property is yours and yours alone. Which brings me to the strategic question. What do you want to do with it? I'd been thinking about this since Sunday night. I want to sell it. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You've spent 8 months renovating it. That's a significant emotional investment. It is. But every weekend I spent there, I was working toward a vision that included Claire and Melody and family gatherings. That vision is dead now. The house is just a reminder of how naive I was. I'd rather sell it, take the money, and start fresh somewhere else. The market is strong right now. You'd likely make a good profit, especially with all the improvements you've made. And the timing is strategic. If you sell before the divorce is final, the proceeds remain your separate property since the house itself is separate property. If you wait until after the divorce, things could get more complicated. Then let's move quickly. What else do I need to know? Victoria flipped through her notes. Your wife is going to fight this. The separation filing will shock her, especially if she thought she had more time to position things in her favor. She'll likely escalate, either through her attorney or personally. You need to be prepared for that. No communication except through lawyers. No meeting in person without witnesses. Document everything. If she shows up at your workplace or home, document it. If she tries to access the lake house, document it. If she makes threats or accusations, document it. What about Melody, my sister? What about her? She's been actively working against me, helping Claire plan all of this. Can I do anything about that? Victoria's expression softened slightly. Legally? Not really, unless she's done something that rises to the level of tortious interference or defamation. But practically, the best thing you can do is cut her out of your life completely. No contact, no explanations, no attempts to defend yourself or change her mind. People like your sister and your wife thrive on drama and engagement. The moment you stop giving them that, they lose their power. I left Victoria's office 2 hours later with a retainer agreement signed, a check written for $15,000, and a plan in motion. The legal separation papers would be filed by end of day. The forensic accountant would start reviewing our finances tomorrow. The private investigator would begin surveillance immediately. I felt lighter somehow, despite the weight of what I was doing. For the first time since Friday evening, I felt like I had control over my own life again. I went to work after that, walking into the office I'd been at for 7 years with a strange sense of detachment. My presentation from Friday had gone well despite everything else falling apart. My boss had sent me an email over the weekend saying the client was impressed and wanted to move forward. Under normal circumstances, that would have been cause for celebration. Now, it just felt like something happening in a parallel universe where my personal life wasn't imploding. I threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. I responded to emails, attended meetings, contributed to strategy sessions, all while my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Claire that I didn't read and calls from Melody that I didn't answer. My colleagues noticed something was different but were too polite or too uncomfortable to ask. I appreciated that. Around 3 in the afternoon, my personal phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Harrison? This is Detective James Morrison with the private investigation firm Victoria Chen retained on your behalf. I wanted to introduce myself and let you know we've begun preliminary surveillance of your wife as discussed. The word surveillance made everything feel suddenly real in a way the legal paperwork hadn't. Already? Ms. Chen indicated this was time-sensitive. We've located your wife at a residence in the Riverside neighborhood. She's been there since approximately 10 this morning and appears to be alone. We'll continue monitoring and documenting her activities as per the scope of work. The Riverside neighborhood? That's where Melody lives. I see. Should we expand surveillance to include the sister as well? I thought about it. Not yet. Focus on Claire for now. Understood. I'll send you an encrypted report at the end of each day with photographic documentation and timeline of activities. If anything significant develops, I'll contact you immediately. After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen without seeing it. Claire was at Melody's house. Of course she was. They were probably strategizing right now, planning their next move, wondering why I wasn't calling or begging or reacting the way they'd expected. My desk phone rang. Internal line. I picked it up to hear my boss's voice. Nathan, can you come to my office for a minute? My heart sank. Had Claire called here? Had she tried to make some kind of scene at my workplace? I walked to his office with my shoulders squared, prepared for whatever accusation or drama she might have created. But when I walked in, my boss, Martin, was smiling. Close the door and sit down. I wanted to talk to you about the promotion we discussed a few months ago. The promotion. I'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of the weekend. Of course, the performance you've shown on the Henderson account sealed it. The partners met this morning and we're offering you Senior Director of Strategic Development. It comes with a significant raise, better benefits, and your own team. I'm not supposed to share numbers before HR processes everything, but we're talking about a 40% increase in base salary plus performance bonuses. I stared at him, trying to process this information. A week ago, this would have been the best news of my life. Now it felt complicated in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. That's incredible, Martin. Thank you. I'm honored. You've earned it. HR will reach out tomorrow with the formal offer letter. I just wanted to tell you personally because you've been instrumental in building this department. He paused, studying my face. You okay, Nathan? You seem a bit off today. I considered lying, giving him some generic excuse about being tired or stressed, but Martin had always been straight with me, and I respected him too much to be completely dishonest. I'm going through some personal issues at home, nothing that will affect my work, but it's been a difficult few days. His expression shifted to concern. I'm sorry to hear that. If you need any time off or flexibility with your schedule, just let me know. We take care of our people here. I appreciate that. Right now, honestly, work is the best distraction I could ask for. After I left his office, I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. A promotion, a massive raise, career advancement I'd been working toward for years. And it was happening right as my marriage was ending and my family was fracturing. The universe had a twisted sense of timing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from the private investigator. Subject left Riverside location at 3:47 p.m., currently heading downtown. Will update with destination. I put the phone away and went back to my desk. The afternoon crawled by, each minute feeling like an hour. I kept waiting for something to happen, for Claire to show up or call or make some dramatic gesture. But there was nothing, just silence and the steady buzz of my phone with updates from the investigator. At 5:30, another message. Subject arrived at Meridian Hotel at 4:15 p.m. Entered through main lobby. Photographic documentation attached. I opened the attachment. There was Claire, walking into the boutique hotel from last month. The same one where she'd claimed to be visiting a college friend. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, her hair done up in a way that suggested she'd spent time on her appearance. She wasn't dressed like someone going to cry on their sister's shoulder about marital problems. She was dressed like someone going on a date. My hands clenched around the phone. Part of me wanted to get in my car, drive to that hotel and confront whoever she was meeting. But Victoria's voice echoed in my head. Document everything. Don't engage. Let them reveal themselves. Another message came through 20 minutes later. Male subject, approximately 35-40 years old, arrived at hotel at 5:52 p.m., entered through same lobby entrance. Will attempt to confirm if subjects are meeting. I stared at that message for a long time. This was it. The confirmation I'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. Claire was having an affair. She'd been having one for at least a month, probably longer. While I'd been working weekends on the lake house, she'd been meeting someone else. While I'd been trying to save for our future and build something meaningful, she'd been destroying our marriage. The betrayal hit me fresh, sharp, and cold. I'd known something was wrong. I'd seen the signs. But knowing and having photographic proof were two different things. My phone rang. Victoria Chen. Mr. Harrison, I just received a call from an attorney named Robert Feldman. He represents your wife. He wanted to inform me that Mrs. Harrison received the separation papers an hour ago and would like to discuss settlement terms. Settlement? We've been separated for less than a week. She's moving quickly, which suggests she's worried about what you might uncover if this process drags out. Mr. Feldman indicated his client is willing to accept a modest cash settlement and walk away from the marriage with minimal conflict. How modest? $200,000 and she signs away all claims to marital property, including any interest in the lake house. I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. She thinks I'm going to pay her $200,000 for the privilege of ending a marriage she's been sabotaging? After she spent our money on a party to humiliate me? While she's apparently having an affair? I haven't mentioned the investigation to Mr. Feldman. That's leverage we'll deploy at the right time. For now, I told him we'd consider the offer and respond tomorrow. But Nathan, I need to ask you something. What's your goal here? Do you want to punish her, or do you want to end this as efficiently as possible? The question stopped me. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Peace? All of the above? I want her to face consequences for what she's done. I want her to know she can't manipulate people and lie and cheat and then walk away with a payout. But I also want this over with. I don't want to spend years in litigation. Then here's what I suggest. We wait for the investigator's report. If he confirms the affair with photographic evidence, We present that to her attorney along with a counteroffer. She gets nothing except whatever she brought into the marriage, and she signs a non-disparagement agreement preventing her from talking badly about you to mutual friends, family, or on social media. If she refuses, we go to trial and present the evidence of adultery, financial manipulation, and fraud. In this state, that could mean she not only gets nothing but potentially owes you compensation. She'd never agree to that. She will if the alternative is public humiliation and financial ruin. Your wife has been building a narrative about you to protect her reputation. Once she realizes that narrative can be destroyed with evidence, she'll reassess her position. At 7 that evening, I finally got the message I'd been dreading and anticipating. Confirmed. Subjects met in hotel bar, proceeded to elevator together at 6:23 p.m., photographic documentation of both meetings and physical contact attached. Will maintain surveillance of exit. I opened the photos. There was Claire at the bar with a man I didn't recognize, someone handsome in a generic way, the kind of guy who probably worked in finance or tech and spent too much time at the gym. There was Claire laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm. There was Claire kissing him as they waited for the elevator, not a quick peck but a real kiss, the kind that showed comfort and familiarity. I forwarded everything to Victoria without comment. She responded within minutes. This changes everything. I'll draft a new settlement proposal tonight. Expect her attorney to call with threats and counter-threats. Ignore all of it. We have her cornered now. I left the office and drove home in a daze. The house felt empty and hostile, full of memories that now felt like lies. I'd lived here with Claire for 4 years, thinking we were building a life together, thinking she was my partner and my friend. How much of it had been real? How much had been performance? I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the times I'd trusted her, believed her, given her the benefit of the doubt. Every late work night that had probably been a hotel meetup. Every girl's trip that had probably included him. Every time she'd pulled away from my touch, claiming exhaustion, when really she'd just been getting her needs met elsewhere. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Claire. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won out. I know you hired someone to follow me. That's insane, Nathan. That's actually crazy behavior. You're proving everything I've been saying about you being controlling. My lawyer says this could constitute harassment and stalking. You need to call off whoever you sent, and we need to talk about this like adults. I made a mistake tonight, okay? I was upset about the separation and I made a bad choice. But you drove me to it with your behavior. If you'd been a better husband, I never would have needed to look elsewhere for companionship. Please, can we just talk? Come to Melody's house and we can all sit down together and work this out. I read the message 3 times, marveling at the audacity. She'd been caught red-handed having an affair and her response was to blame me, claim I'd driven her to it, and demand I come to her sister's house for another intervention. The manipulation was almost impressive in its shamelessness. I didn't respond. I just screenshot the message and forwarded it to Victoria with a note. She's blaming me for the affair and calling the investigation stalking, also inviting me to Melody's house for another setup. Victoria's response came immediately despite the late hour. Perfect. She's panicking and making mistakes. Don't respond. Don't engage. Let her spiral. Tuesday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Claire and 9 from Melody. There were dozens of text messages, each one more frantic than the last. Claire claiming I was ruining her life. Melody insisting I was being unreasonable and needed to give Claire a chance to explain. Both of them demanding I call them immediately. I deleted every message without reading most of them. I got dressed, went to work, and focused on transitioning into my new role. HR had the offer letter ready, and I signed it in a conference room while trying not to think about how different this moment should have felt. At noon, Victoria called. Robert Feldman just called me. His client is willing to reduce her settlement demand to $100,000 if we drop the investigation and agree not to use any evidence we've gathered. Oh, so she knows we have proof. She knows. And she's terrified. But here's the interesting part. Feldman let slip that she's concerned about her reputation at work. Apparently, adultery clauses in employment contracts are more common than people realize, especially at firms that deal with financial services and ethics standards. If word got out that she'd been having an affair, it could cost her the job. A plan formed in my mind, cold and calculated. Tell him we'll consider $50,000 and a comprehensive non-disparagement agreement. But she has to sign a confession detailing the affair, the financial manipulation, and the fake intervention. The document stays sealed unless she violates the non-disparagement clause, at which point it becomes public record. Victoria was quiet for a moment. That's harsh, Nathan. It's essentially holding her reputation hostage. She tried to destroy mine. She gathered our friends, manipulated my sister, threw a party designed to humiliate me, and did it all while having an affair and spending our money on hotel rooms. I'm offering her a way out that doesn't involve court testimony and public records. That's more generous than she deserves. I'll present it to Feldman. Expect pushback. The pushback came within hours. Feldman called Victoria back, claiming the confession requirement was unconscionable, possibly illegal, definitely unethical. Victoria calmly explained that it was entirely legal, and that if Mrs. Harrison preferred, we could simply proceed to trial where all the evidence would be presented in open court and become part of public record. The confession requirement actually protected her privacy by keeping the information sealed. By Wednesday afternoon, Feldman called again. My client agrees to the financial terms and non-disparagement agreement, but she won't sign a confession. She's willing to sign a statement acknowledging general marital discord and taking responsibility for choices that contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. Victoria relayed this to me. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. No deal. Full confession or we go to trial. I'm not playing word games with someone who's spent months playing word games with me. Nathan, you're well within your rights, but I want to make sure you understand the emotional cost of going to trial. It will be ugly, public, drawn out. Even if you win, and you likely will, it's going to hurt. I know, but here's what I've realized. Claire and Melody and all those friends at the lake house, they counted on me being too nice, too reasonable, too conflict-averse to really fight back. They thought I'd accept whatever scraps they offered just to avoid confrontation. I'm done being that person. If Claire wants to avoid public humiliation, she signs the confession. If not, we'll let a judge decide who deserves to be humiliated. Thursday afternoon, Feldman called Victoria one final time. My client agrees to all terms, including the confession. She wants this over with. Smart woman, Victoria said. We'll have the documents ready for signature tomorrow. That night I sat in my house, the same house where this had all started less than a week ago, and tried to process everything that had happened. My marriage was over. My sister had chosen Claire's side. My friend group was fractured beyond repair. The lake house I'd poured months into would be sold. My entire life had been dismantled in the span of a few days. But I'd also gotten a major promotion. I'd protected my assets. I'd uncovered the truth about my wife's infidelity. I'd refused to be manipulated or controlled or made into a villain. I'd stood up for myself in a way I never had before. Friday morning, I met Victoria at her office to review the final documents. The separation agreement was comprehensive. Claire would receive $50,000, half of what was in the joint account after my withdrawal. She would sign away all claims to marital property, including the lake house, the furniture, everything. She would sign a non-disparagement agreement preventing her from speaking negatively about me for 5 years. And she would sign a confession detailing her affair, the financial manipulation, and the fake intervention. The confession was single-spaced and 2 pages long. It started with a simple sentence. I, Claire Marie Harrison, confess that I have been having an extramarital affair with Marcus Webb for approximately 4 months. It went on to detail dates, locations, amounts of money spent on hotel rooms. It described the weekend intervention plan, including specific dollar amounts spent from the joint account and acknowledgement that the event was a party, not a therapeutic intervention. It ended with a statement that I, Nathan Harrison, had done nothing to deserve the treatment I'd received, and that all accusations of controlling or abusive behavior were false. This is airtight, Victoria said. If she signs this, you're protected. She can't come back later claiming you were at fault. She can't badmouth you to friends without risking public exposure. And if she violates any terms of the separation agreement, you have grounds to pursue damages. When does she sign? 2 o'clock this afternoon, here in this office. Feldman insisted she wanted to do it quickly before she changed her mind. At 1:55, I sat in Victoria's conference room waiting. My hands were steady, my mind clear. I'd thought I might feel nervous or emotional when this moment came, but instead I just felt resolved. This was the right thing, the necessary thing. The door opened and Claire walked in with Feldman, her attorney. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes rumpled like she'd slept in them. When she saw me, her face crumpled and fresh tears started. "Nathan, please, can we talk privately for just a minute?" "No," I said calmly. "We're here to sign documents, that's all. I made mistakes, I know that. But this confession, it's too much. If this ever gets out, it'll ruin me. Please, can't we just do the financial settlement and the non-disparagement agreement? I promise I'll never say a bad word about you. I'll tell everyone the divorce was mutual, that we just grew apart. Please." I looked at her. This woman I'd loved for 6 years. This woman who'd shared my bed and my life and my dreams and felt absolutely nothing. "You should have thought about that before you manipulated me, lied to me, and cheated on me. Sign the documents or we'll see you in court." Feldman put a hand on her arm. "Claire, we discussed this. This is the best option available to you. If you go to trial, everything becomes public record anyway, plus you'll spend tens of thousands in legal fees and likely end up with nothing. This way you get $50,000 and the chance to move on with your life. But the confession stays sealed unless you violate the agreement. All you have to do is keep quiet and move on." "Can you do that?" She stared at the documents in front of her, tears dripping onto the table. "I loved you," she said to me, her voice breaking. "I really did. I don't know what happened. Everything got confused and complicated and I made bad choices." "You made deliberate choices," I corrected. "You planned that weekend for weeks, probably months. You recruited my sister and my friends. You spent thousands of dollars. You cheated on me repeatedly." None of that was confusion or complication. That was calculated betrayal. "Your sister convinced me you were becoming someone different. She said you were changing and we needed to intervene before you pushed everyone away. I was trying to help you." "By having an affair? By throwing a party to humiliate me? That's an interesting definition of help." Feldman cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrison makes a valid point, Claire. I think we should proceed with the signing." Claire picked up the pen with a shaking hand. She read through each document slowly, as if hoping to find some escape clause or loophole. But Victoria had drafted everything perfectly. There was no way out except through. She signed the financial settlement first, then the non-disparagement agreement. Finally, with her hand trembling so badly she could barely write, she signed the confession. Each signature felt like a small victory, a tiny piece of justice in a situation that had felt completely unjust. When the last document was signed, Feldman gathered the papers and stood. "We'll provide certified copies within 48 hours. Mrs. Harrison will vacate the marital residence by the end of the month and will have no further claim to any property listed in the settlement agreement." Claire stood too, looking at me with devastation written across her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of it. I really am." "I know," I said, and I did know. She was sorry. Sorry she got caught. Sorry her plans fell apart. Sorry she had to face consequences, but not sorry enough to have not done it in the first place. She walked out with Feldman, her shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of her choices. Victoria closed the door behind them and turned to me with something that might have been respect. "You handled that well.